weeks out, right? This general preparatory, but it's still, when you're talking about general preparatory, it's still kind of similar to the movement pattern. So in this sequencing, in this complex method, general preparatory exercises are almost like phase 1, phase 2 exercises in the regular block periodization model, right? So you're not getting real GPP. You're not getting real fitness here. It's still specific to the sport. Now we're getting sports preparatory exercises. So it basically, if you want to read it here, but you're getting more specific as far as if you want to put it into terms of like the punching of the weights, this is what you would be doing, right? Don't do that though, by the way. Right? Specific development, now we're talking about tactical training here, right? This is far from what we're trying to accomplish as physical preparation coaches. This is more. Then from there, you're talking about competitive exercises. So now we're talking about 5x5s or, 12 rounds of sparring, of grappling. That's what I'm talking about when it comes down to that. We usually don't even see them at this point. We're 2 to 1 weeks out. We don't even see them in this method, right? Because they're more into their skills training right there. You just kind of want to keep corrective exercises going, mobility, things like that. Keep that recovery as much as possible, all right? We're trying to decay fatigue with them if we're doing complex method. But primarily, they're going to be doing their sparring, their grappling, things like that in this particular method, okay? Now notice what I'm trying to give to you guys. I'm giving you periodization models that you can program into each individual athlete depending on the situation. I'm not giving you a one-size-fits-all approach because this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach sport, right? I'm giving you the parameters, right? I'm giving you some details that you can utilize, but I'm not telling you that this is the only way to do it and this is the only way to do it. You have to know how to be a coach. I'm giving you the breakdown of it all so that you can be the coach to put that into play, okay? Okay, so exercises for combat sports performance. So exercises that create the greatest overall value, right? Like a Zercher squat, I feel. Movement that can directly correlate to the sport. So let's say, for instance, a floor press, a glute bridge floor press. That's something that I know that it correlates to a sport just because if you're thinking about mounted situations, if you're thinking about a bridge and roll, if you're thinking about shrimping, this is kind of the same movement pattern, plus you're working on muscles that actually enhance that movement quality. Okay, training muscle groups that will enhance the full athleticism, so same thing like I just said, and perform exercises that create functional strength for the sport, right? So functional strength training doesn't mean shit if it's not functional for the sport, right? When somebody says, oh, I'm training functionally, or I'm doing functional training, well, what are you doing functional training? What kind of functional training are you doing? You know what I'm saying? So it has to be functional for the sport of MMA or combat sports in general. Utilizing corrective exercises that eliminate imbalances and compensation patterns. This is going to be a key thing for you. This should be at least 60 to 80% of your programming right here. Is corrective exercises, right? The physicians love me for this, by the way. And the clinicians, they love me. But corrective exercises that eliminate imbalances, because let's face it, they're going to have imbalances, asymmetries all the way through because that's just the nature of the sport, right? Okay, main compound lifts, okay? So with the compound lifts, I think that for me, I know that it gives the greatest amount of turnover, right? So we're talking general specific in nature, but you know, when it comes down to GPP, you still want to create a solid base of strength. So using compound lifts to work the entire musculature of the body in proprioception, kinesthetic awareness, making sure that their body has structural integrity. Compound lifts are going to do that first. We know that, right? It's easy work. Okay, right? We want to strengthen that posterior chain. Talked about this all throughout this time, right? Because of the over amount of anterior work that they're doing, right? In the anterior chain, we want to make sure that we're lessening that imbalance. All right. I want to improve in body positioning and structural integrity. So, like I said, you just want to make sure we're balancing things out. Creates total base of support, laying that down as a foundation of strength throughout the entire body. And it's going to potentiate into greater force adaptations due to all of the compound lifts that you're utilizing with your entire body. It improves athleticism and coordination for the sport. listen, if you can get them squatting and deadlifting and pressing better, it will help them understand their body in all different directions. Okay, and it's going to strengthen up certain areas inside the sport itself. If I can get good anti-rotation strength while I'm sitting in guard, I'm never going to get swept. Okay, and I figured that out a long time ago because I don't get swept, man. He's like, yeah, all right. We'll see, motherfucker. All right, so here's my Zercher. Yeah. All right. All right, so here's a Zercher squat. These are heavier Zerchers here. As you can see, even though, you know, for him, he's kyphotic in nature with the rolled shoulders, he still can properly hip hinge. We're not putting the spine in any advantageous position with axial loading. He's engaging his upper back, so now we're actually working some posterior chain, keeping the core tight, and then we're able to work through that squat motion pretty efficiently with that, okay? Floor press with the glute bridge. This is what I was talking about before. So with the glute bridge, the great thing about this is you can create irradiation through that bridge because you're actually squeezing your glutes, your hamstrings, you're locking everything down. That shit. But you get what I'm saying. Oh, fucking. Stop moving. Trap bar deadlift. You guys don't have to see that. You know that. Okay, Z press from a seated position, right? I do the Z press just because, one, it helps with controlling the core. Obviously, they have to have the prerequisites to do so. If they can't get an overhead position, right, without weight, I'm not going to do it with weight, right? But most of the time, if they do have that solid external rotation of the shoulder, they can do an overhead without leaning back. This will be a definite good go. And it's another variation for a press movement, right? Okay. Cold has got me. All right, so posterior chain and core exercises. So anti-rotation, anti-flexion. We're going to increase force production, increase stability, and the reduction of injury there. So anti-rotation is definitely a good thing for me that I utilize primarily. And when it comes down to formulating a program, when it comes down to exercises, it's going to be some sort of squat, some sort of hinge, some sort of press, pull, and anti-rotation or anti-flexion. That's it. And then you can also throw in some carries, right? Carries can also be towards anti-rotation, anti-flexion. What's up?
Do you utilize maybe like safety bar squat instead of the
yeah. Yeah, if I have a safety bar with me, yeah, for sure. SSB bar is going to be good because, one, I mean, the axial load is still there, but also if you think about it, it's in a high bar squat, right? It's sitting on top of the shoulders. So you're actually getting some core activation too. And I'll use the SSB bar with a box squat, right? So then I can utilize my hips, my hamstrings, but also I'm working on core stability, right? So as I come up, and obviously we're working on RFD, so as I come up, it's static overcome by dynamic. We're rocking, holding position, and then driving, using our hamstrings to come back up, using our hips to lock out, keeping that core engaged, because if I don't, I'm going to round forward. So it actually works the upper back, core, hips, and hamstrings. If you're doing a regular SSB squat, you're primarily going to work quads more than anything. But if I can, well, let me stop there. You're going to work your entire legs, but the muscles that are really going to be activated, especially depending on where you're at in your stance, is going to be more quad dominant. Yeah, so extension and flexion, strengthen areas for sport performance, intra and intermuscular coordination, sarcoplasmic myofibular hypertrophy. So the basic difference there is sarcoplasmic is the building of the tissue, right? And myofibular is the building of the fibers inside the tissue. So if it's the difference between a bodybuilder and a powerlifter, okay? Some guys are big, bulky, but can't produce any type of force. We want to make sure that actually we get a little bit of this, but a lot of that, okay? And you do that through proper programming and also frequency, or I should say volume and intensity there. Okay. Structural balance and stability, right? You have to be stable. You have to be able to move efficiently. You have to be able to redirect force, and you have to have good agility in this sport, right? We need to be able to be in and out with good balance, okay? Oh no. All right, so here's an exercise that I utilize for overspeed eccentrics. To use the band, we do kettlebell swings there. So you're getting overspeed eccentrics, but also working on posterior chain and hip power. I'll do this depending on, obviously, the program itself. This will primarily be on phase 2 if you're talking about standard block periodization, because now we're working on, obviously, low intensities here. And using that band just to kind of give you that deceleration. And also, it eliminates the deceleration and increases. All right, hold on. So GHR, you guys know what this is, right? So for me, we talked about this, me and Mac, but you could do a standard GHR, which is basically you have to come all the way down and come back up. I like to isolate my hamstrings with these, so it's almost like a Nordic curl, right? And to make it harder, you would eliminate that sliding of the knee. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your knees up here. But basically what this does is it definitely isolates the hamstrings and the glutes. So for you, this would be good because you tore your hamstring, right? You want to make sure that you strengthen up the hamstrings, okay? What I see a lot of too with fighters, man, is that they have weaker hamstrings, weaker lower back, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, because they're primarily going to be in their guard or on their backs. So they're tight, caved in, using their hip flexors a lot. So they don't really use that antagonistic muscle of the glutes and hamstrings. So to reduce those imbalances, we like to work on that. So more resistance here. What the fuck going on? There we go. Here we go. Here we go. So yeah, basically what you do, you grab a band. We'll go opposite arm, opposite leg. This is more contralateral stability, right? Anti-rotation, anti-flexion. We're going to maintain a neutral spine, making sure that you're not caving in a lumbar, keeping good core stability. Head is long. The band is actually just going to help you with added resistance at the end point of the movement. I'm going to go a little bit faster through this. You guys can see this one again. What the fuck? Okay. So these are pull-throughs. You guys ever did this before? This is another anti-rotation. Contralateral stability here. So with this, I like this is kind of simulating drag-throughs or snap downs, things like that. But we're keeping our core stable while we're moving distally, right? So proximal stability with distal mobility, keeping everything tight, making sure you're not twisting at the hips as much as possible, right? But you're also working some of the upper body as well. It's a regular bird dog. That was actually an advanced bird dog where you come off the leg or off the knee, so the knee's off the ground, and you're doing it from a stand or from a bilateral position. Okay, this is a bird dog row. So I got one leg on the bench, other leg's out. Same thing in a bird dog position, but now I'm rowing in that position, so it's contralateral stability there, right? Anti-rotation, making sure that I'm activating my lat, right? But I'm also keeping good tightness in my far side glute and keeping my core. It's fucking hard, dude. Yeah. Yeah.
Look at it like,
I ain't shit. And then you go and you're like, oh. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Okay, so here's my shin box get up with a payloft press. So right here now, we're working on activating the glute on the far side, also hip mobility, then contralateral stability or anti-rotation here. So I'm maintaining tightness in my obliques, right? My anterior serratus, and I'm also getting a good glute squeeze on the top. Then from here, I'll actually go ahead and do a bear sit, right? So I'll actually work on hip mobility while I'm in the payloft press position. We'll get into that too as well, but there's another one for anti-rotation, contralateral stability, with strength, and then, right there, stop. So we're gonna go through all these physically, so I don't have to really show you guys, but now we're going to get into a little bit of the coaching parameters. So training is a process, right? You want to introduce that stimulus like we talked about. Make sure it is conducive to the situation and the goal, right? We want to train the desired stimulus for a given amount of time. So we want to make sure that the frequency, the time, the duration, everything is encompassed and it also matches the adaptation that we're trying to acquire per situation, right? We want to deload and auto-regulate when necessary, right? We want to manage that fatigue. We want to decrease overall work, right? And we want to get that the stimulus recoverable adaptation there. Supercompensation is going to be a key factor. Obviously, we know now about supercompensation, so that's not something we have to talk too much in detail about, but we want to meet the demands, right, and adapting to the goal that was set out in the beginning of the program, right? Peaking and competing, I usually do a 2-week taper into a peak for that fight, depending on if we have a 8 to 12 week camp. If I don't know when they're fighting, that's a little bit difficult to do, but if all things are equal and I'm in a perfect world, 2-week taper and then 1-week deload, we go into the fight. All right, we want to transition into out of camp. So once fight's over, I give them a week to recover, and then we go into our transition phase. So it's a low intensity, higher volume to increase that work capacity, right? So then we start to go into our out of camp training, okay? So athlete development ages. So chronological age, right, is basically how old they are, right? So you want to take that into account. If they're 22 or they're 35, obviously the training is going to be different, right? Biologically, so physiological age, right? Like how well are they developed, right? Are they physically developed yet, or they still have a lot of growing to do? That's where you want to make sure that you understand that. And then training age is going to be very important, right? You know, how well or how long have they been in the weight room? And that's where it's going to depict upon what program you actually go ahead and put together for them. Okay, my assessment protocol. All right, so like I said, that psychological questionnaire, right? We're talking about performance goals. Like, what do you want to increase, right? Strength, speed, power, conditioning, all that physical attributes that we want to acquire. That's something that we want to make sure that we're getting into. Experience with coaches. How well do they interact with their coach? What kind of coach do they like? Do they like to be yelled at, or do they like to not be yelled at all? Some people are different, man. Some people like to be yelled and get in their face. Some people don't like that shit and will shut down if you do that. So you want to make sure that you have that level of knowingness to see exactly how well you're going to coach. And then also, like I said before, what's their why? What motivates them? Is it family? Is it money? Do they want to be a champion? What is it? What drives them? And that's going to help you, actually help them coach, or actually coach them to where you want to be. Okay. Okay, so physiological assessment. We do a DEXA scan for body composition, and that's primarily just to see exactly how well we can push the envelope as far as, bringing up hypertrophy. Also, it helps with the cut, and then it gives me a baseline of readiness. I actually see exactly how well they're in shape there. If they're out of shape, and I know they fucking gained 30 pounds and they're too much adipose tissue, then we got a problem here. So we know we need to work on something at that point. Bone density scan. This is good for, like I said, bone and ligament health, so I can see exactly how well they can keep a structural bound. So if if they get punched or kicked, I know they're not going to break some shit, right? So we want to make sure that we have that level of knowingness there. Awareness of readiness, and then nutritional guidelines are actually going to be something that we want to talk about too. If they're lacking in that bone density, obviously we want to make sure we increase that calcium and vitamin D. Okay. Lactate threshold testing, we'll do this with either a Airdyne bike or something inside as far as like in cohesiveness with the VO2 max. So you can actually measure out the lactate threshold with the VO2 with what we have in the lab. And I take them usually over to Corey Peacock's lab. So he's a PhD, he does all his stuff, and I just kind of collect data. But basically we're going to get a baseline of overall fitness, not performance here, fitness. And then it's going to be a target for future testing at the end of camp. Okay? And like I said, we get that VO2 max to see maximal heart rate, to also, you know, what their body runs off of as far as substrates goes, and how well they can recover in between rounds. We talked about this earlier. Here's the testing that we did. So here's the DEXA scan. She got scared when she stepped on this. She thought it was like an MRI thing. I told her don't worry about it. And I'm just kind of warming her up, getting her ready. Right, just firing her central nervous system up a little bit, because she just got done. And now this isn't like a perfect world. She just got done with sparring, so it wasn't entirely accurate, but it was what we had to do at that time. I gave her about 6 hours of rest, and then we went and did it. In a perfect world, I would have her not do anything, and we go do the testing. We started off there. The test ended around 12 minutes, right? And that's when she got her max heart rate up, and she was primarily running off of fats until the last couple of minutes, and it dipped into carbohydrates. So that's something we did there.
Do you think treadmill test is like, because like I've read a few different studies on jiu-jitsu athletes. One was judo, one was two was jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
So one was like European and two was judo studies. But the testing parameters were light.
Yeah.
They were like, run on a treadmill.
Uh-huh.
You don't do that in judo or in
Sure. I know.
And so, like, when you want someone like Joanna, like, she's an animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's a super elite, she's a champ, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder,
Please.
do you think that's a good reflection? Do you know?
Not from, like I said, it's not performance, it's fitness. So, like, an overall fitness base, yeah, but like I told you again, it may give us some of an indication of how well she's in shape, but it also makes her understand that she is in shape.
Oh, okay.
So psychologically,